And I do wonder, as you head to the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue today, what's number one on your agenda? Is it USMCA?
Yeah, it is economically. Certainly, now that we have one of the more modern tax codes in the world, our economy has changed dramatically. What we really need now are more customers and more workers. The USMCA gives us those more customers. It's obviously a much more modern agreement. President Trump and Ambassador Lighthizer, I think, have updated it very well. It certainly, for us, will allow us to sell more Made in America products to our two best customers, Mexico and Canada. But then we combine the strengths of those three countries. Our local businesses can compete and win anywhere in the world because of this new trade agreement. So it's crucial.
And are you hearing more positive vibes from your colleagues on the other side of the aisle over this? Are they being convinced that the message is right?
I do hear more positive comments from Democrats. I think that's because Ambassador Lighthizer made it known very early he was going to work to address some of the traditional, or many of the traditional concerns Democrats often have with these agreements, especially those in the labor and environmental areas. He spent a considerable amount of time and effort to get that right. And so I think he starts with, and this agreement starts with a much higher level of support, bipartisan, than other agreements have. I think the key on this is timing. It really needs to be done this summer. At the end of the day, Speaker Pelosi will really determine the timetable when the White House sends it to us.
Well, and I wanted to ask you about that very specifically, that timing. How much do you worry that it could move after the August recess, and then we're really in the thick of 2020? It becomes even more of a political football.
Yeah, I think the sweet spot really is this summer. I worry about all this rush to impeachment. We've got 4 investigating committees against the president. They won't let go of the Mueller collusion stuff. That's getting in the way of the real issues that Americans are really focused on, which is, hey, how do we get this economy going? How do we sell more of my agriculture, my local products? How do we compete better? And this is what USMCA does.
All right. Well, I have to imagine that after, or maybe even before you get to USMCA, the president and you are going to want to talk a little bit about China. President Xi over in Europe. We were talking with some folks over there earlier in the show. Where are we there? What do you need to see to make you feel comfortable that it's a real win for the United States as it relates to China?
Well, I think if it wasn't a real win, it would have already been concluded. The fact that they have spent now nearly a month and a half going through the serious details of this potential agreement tells you how substantive it is. They recognize, look, we're not asking, they're not demanding China change its economic model. It's demanding it changes the part of the model that depends on cheating. And so, look, getting an agreement that is substantive, that is measurable, that can be enforced at every level of governance in China. All of that's very much on the front side of where the negotiations are. And so the fact that they are taking their time, not rushing into a bad deal, making it significant, I think that bodes well.
Well, and speaking of taking time, what do you make of the idea that tariffs should be removed on day one? Should they be, or should we wait to see whether the Chinese ultimately live up to the agreement?
I think it's important that these commitments be measurable. And the president may want to phase down those tariffs. I think the key thing is that for those tariffs to go away ultimately, I think it's pretty critical. Certainly some of those tariffs and early release from them would be hugely helpful for both countries, in both of our interests there. But look, I think all that should be in the design of the final package. At the end of the day, I'm not a fan of tariffs. I want them gone so that those costs are lower and we can do more free trade.
All right, well, let's talk a little taxes. It is that time of year. You were an author of this major tax overhaul that we saw last year. As people start to get their refunds or they start to get tax bills, how much do you worry about the politics and the optics of that if those refunds don't come through maybe the way folks are used to?
Well, they are. Right now, while last week refunds were actually higher than they were last year. Right now, they're breaking just about even. The same amount of people are getting refunds, and they're just about the same amount as in past years. So we'll see. They can vary through a tax season, but I expect at the end of this tax season, they will be very close to what they were. And as importantly, people will not only have the refunds they got in the past, they will actually have gotten the tax cut that began showing up in their paychecks last February. So I feel very confident the tax season is going to go well, and support for the new tax cuts continue to grow.
Well, speaking of taxes, and I'm speaking to you as a New Yorker, sitting here among a lot of New Yorkers who are, maybe concerned. And I spoke with someone on Wall Street today who was talking about this state and local tax issue. How much do you hear about that? Or are you just hearing a lot of bad news from folks in the tri-state area, but not so much from other parts of the country?
Look, New York, New Jersey, these are fantastic states, very dynamic. People love living there. But their state and local taxes are brutally high and so far out of the mainstream, it's just hard to describe that. The $10,000 cap is double the national average. These states, you're getting pounded with unbelievably high taxes. And so at the end of the day, repealing the SALT cap will be a $10 tax cut for the middle class, about $140,000 a year tax cut for the wealthy. That's where almost all of that goes. And so at the end of the day, I think states like New Jersey, New York, California, Connecticut, Illinois, and Minnesota, they're going to have to lower their taxes, give their people a break.
Well, and probably folks down in Lake Conroe, where you're from, are with you on that one. One more question for you, very Wall Street focused. Carried interest tax treatment, it's been bandied about for the better part of a decade, maybe a bit more. Do you see this Congress taking that up, and would you support that?
So Democrats may, excuse me, Jason, raise this issue. I don't think it ultimately goes very far, and here's why. We struck a balance in the new tax code on carried interest. We wanted to make sure that individuals were risking their own capital. Secondly, we wanted to make sure they were not just flipping these things around, but holding them long term. So I think the 3-year hold was an appropriate. It really chased a lot of actors out of the carried interest approach, really made it what we hoped, which would be longer term investment, pro-growth, people putting their capital at risk. So I think in the Congress, in tax reform, we found a balance between all parties.